However, hi everybody and welcome back. Today is gonna be a little bit slightly different video. We're not working on the car, but instead we're working on this. This is the exact same engine that is in my car. It did came from another Superb, in fact, and it's been replaced at the workshop because it's running bad. Now, from what I've been told, it misfired. It doesn't have any compression on cylinder 3, which is this one right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they've also said that there is some scratches on the cylinder walls. So I thought it's going to be an interesting video for everyone who wants to see. We're going to tear down this engine apart. Yes, it doesn't look like the engine in the other car because it's completely stripped down. All the parts have been moved to the new engine, and all you have here is basically valve cover, head, block, and oil pans, obviously. So I want to tear it apart, see what the problem is, see how much the damage on the cylinder walls is. I believe the problem is in the piston rings. I've seen before the piston rings on these engines going bad, and that is not that much big of a trouble. It can be replaced, it can be fixed, but want to check for ourselves, and perhaps I save it for some future project. Anyway, before I begin with the tearing process, I want to show you something. I want to show you how you can check if your chain is stretched or not, and this is according to the repair manual. Now, the way I'm looking at this engine right now, it's exactly the same way or the same orientation in your car. So here's the intake. At the rear is your turbo, your exhaust, and on the left side is your timing chain. So here you have your timing chain cover, upper timing chain cover, and lower timing chain cover. If you go down, right here is your dipstick. Dipstick goes from down there right about here. So if you follow your dipstick, you're gonna see a plug here, a little plug that I removed. It looks like this, and once you remove this, what you're gonna see at the back is your chain tensioner. Now, I know you can't really see it very well on the video, but I'm gonna take a picture for you guys to show you better and explain what you need. What you need is to count how many teeth you see. If it's fewer than 6, or 6 and fewer, you're still good. Your chain is still good for the moment. However, if you see 7 or more, your chain has been stretched and it needs to be replaced. This is how you do it according to the repair manual. Oh, and by the way, this plug, make sure you get a new one before you remove it, because it has to be replaced every time you remove it. It's just a few bucks, so it's not that expensive. Anyway, with that being said, you can go on the other side. Here's where your turbo sits. As you guys can see, they have removed everything, well, almost everything, but yeah, pretty much every single part. Anyway, with that being said, let's start tearing this thing apart. I'm gonna begin by removing the vacuum pump, which is driven by the exhaust camshaft on these engines. On the other side, we'll continue by removing the camshaft control valves. This engine has camshaft timing adjustment, which is controlled by these valves, and also has variable valve lift on the exhaust camshaft, which I will show in more details later. You need a special tool to remove those control valves, and they're also reverse threaded. Next is the upper timing chain cover, which is plastic with a rubber gasket, making it quite easy to remove. After that is the camshaft bridge. Before I continue any further, I'm putting the engine in TDC, or top dead center. If I rebuild this engine sometime in the future, I'll make more detailed explanation on how to time everything properly. Following is the camshaft pulley and the lower timing chain cover. The lower cover is metal and is using silicone sealant, which will make it very difficult to remove and will most likely result in the cover being bent. If you're doing a timing chain job, make sure you get a new lower cover and save yourself the struggle. But in this case, I did forget to remove one bolt. Let's pause here for a minute and quickly go over what we're looking at. The chain system on these engines might look messy to some people, especially if you compare it to some American engines, but when you break it down, it's actually not that scary. There are 3 chains in total, driven by the 3-stage sprocket, as Volkswagen calls it, at the bottom. The shortest chain at the front is your oil pump chain. Right next to it is its guide, which also serves as a tensioner. The one in the middle is your main chain, connecting your crankshaft to your camshaft. It also has right guide, left guide, upper guide, and a tensioner. This is a tensioner that you see when you remove the inspection plug I showed you earlier on the lower timing cover. At the very back is the chain for your balancing shafts. It also has upper, right and left guides as well as a tensioner. Apart from your main chain, the balancing shaft chain must also be timed correctly if removed, otherwise it will lead to increased engine vibrations. The oil pump chain requires no timing. For some reason, I decided to begin with the main chain tensioner. There is a special tool to compress that tensioner, but I did not have it, so I decided to do it the please don't kill me way. Continuing with the main chain guide rails, but very soon I'll realize that I haven't removed the oil pump chain yet. The upper guide was really stuck in place, so I decided to break it. If this engine is ever rebuilt, those guides and chains will be replaced with new ones anyway. Next on the list is the valve cover. Not sure if this is actually called valve cover because on these engines it is also holding the camshafts in place. They don't have separate caps. looking for damage to the rollers, but so far everything looks fine. Begin loosening the head bolts. At this point I started inspecting the pistons and the cylinders. For my surprise, there was almost nothing out of the ordinary. Don't mind the small amount of coolant on the top of the pistons, probably leaked a little bit when removing the head. The only weird thing that I found in the third cylinder is something that looks like sand on the top and the bottom parts of the piston, and perhaps in between the piston and the cylinder wall, which could cause the loss of compression, I suppose. But apart from that, nothing else. Flipping the engine over to remove the oil pans, windage tray and oil pump in order to inspect it from the bottom. For some reason in this video I did not remove the crank and balancing shafts, but I did it eventually. Something that I forgot to mention was that this engine has, or well had, only 110,000 kilometers on the clock. Going for a final inspection on the crankshaft, the journals looks quite good. The rod bearings look almost new, with slight signs of wear of course. All of the piston rings are in place, no carnage, for which I'm a bit disappointed, but also happy because this engine is actually rebuildable. Looking at the cylinder walls, you can still see the cross hatching from the factory. They would need to be re-honed though if I'm going to install new rings and pistons. Flip the engine once again to take a better look at the rod journals, which are not bad as I mentioned. Can't feel any scratches whatsoever. Here we have the intake and exhaust cams. In the beginning I said that this engine has variable valve lift on the exhaust cam, but what is that? Basically there are two different cam profiles, a higher and a lower one. While driving on low RPM, cruising around town for example, the lower profile will be used. If you decide to have some fun and your foot becomes really heavy out of a sudden, it will switch to the higher profile, opening those exhaust valves a little more and for a longer duration. The way the transition works is by using a bunch of solenoids that are located on the top of the valve cover at the exhaust sides. The cam lobes are essentially like sleeves that slide onto the camshaft into place using splines. You can move them left and right with your hand if you will, but I advise against that because there is a spring with a ball underneath that which will fly away and will never be found again. Here is a short animation on how exactly that system works. Currently it is using the higher, more aggressive lobe. When switching over, the particular solenoid responsible will engage into the channel, sliding the entire sleeve to the left and vice versa.